What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Ghost Code Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Keefe. Today's podcast is an interview with Albert Mudrian of Decibel magazine, and we're talking all about the Decibel Metal and Beer Fest. Third annual event takes place at the Fillmore in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, April 13th and 14th. Check it out. We'll jump into a fun and hopefully informative interview with Albert Mudrian of Decibel magazine and the Decibel Metal and Beer Fest. How are you doing, man?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am terrific. So, congratulations on this beast after just a few years. Decibel Metal and Beer Festival is coming back to Philly for another round after a very successful, from all accounts, LA debut.
Yeah.
Great job. This bill is, tremendous. And so I just kind of wanted to start there. I know, having talked to other, festival founders, how they kind of approach booking a bill. So I wanted to ask you how you approach putting this lineup together.
Well, I mean, for me, it's a little bit different because I feel like I have, I don't want to say if it, I guess the right word isn't the, trying to think of how to articulate this. Decibel, the magazine itself, is a fairly established brand with a pretty recognizable aesthetic. And for me, I want to be able to mirror what we do in the magazine with what we're doing. I want to be able to do that curatorially with the festival, with the band lineup. And that's kind of the challenge for me, is like, okay, we have a pretty wide umbrella of bands that kind of fit under the Decibel umbrella. Baroness are on the cover this month. Full of Hell was on the cover last month. Significant chasm in terms of like the sound between those two artists. So the challenge becomes like, how do you make this dynamic? How do you make this and cohesive at the same time? And, basically, I try to build something that I would find interesting, that I would want to attend. Would I be excited to go to this? Would I make the effort to go see an event where I knew a band was doing a special album set, or it was a rare appearance, or it was a band that was going to play directly after a band they would never normally play directly after or before, just kind of stuff like that. That's just leaving out the beer completely. I think when I started, I was trying to combine bands that I thought of in my head as like craft beer friendly artists to be a part of this thing, and I still ultimately would like that to be the case, but I think that as time moves on, it's getting clearer and clearer that most bands are just craft beer friendly in general, just because more and more people are craft beer friendly in general these days. So for me, you don't have to be like Dave Whitty to be able to perform at the event and have it be something that aesthetically works. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah, I feel like, all of that being said, you still need to put together a lineup that you think is going to draw enough people to cover your nuts. And that's the challenge. There's a lot of different factors at work, but I feel like the fact that we have a festival that is a 2-day event that is not like billion bands, I think that like makes it a little bit clearer to people like what it's all about. Like, sure, there's bands some people aren't going to recognize on the lineup and on the ad mat, but there aren't like 2 or 3 dozen bands they're going to be unfamiliar with. So from that sense, and I think that I think that kind of speaks to our demographic for an event like this, because it's a beer fest. So out of the gate, there's going to be a slightly older audience, and I mean, I'm 43. I'd prefer not to sit through 14 bands in a day. I'd like a nice solid stretch of bands where I don't feel like I'm ready to take a nap after like 3 or 4 bands. So it's about, pacing and making each set kind of special. And again, it's just like a very I don't want to say it's well curated, but it's thoughtfully curated. Let's put it that way. I spend a lot of time thinking who fits where, and hopefully at the end of the day, it's a lineup that people look at it and go, okay, yeah, that works. I want to go to that.
Nice, I agree. And I think last year, certainly the LA lineup was a beast. Last year's lineup in the spring was also, an awesome mix of bands. I wanted to ask about the curated performances, which you noted. Obviously Obituary performing Cause of Death and Enslaved doing Frost, which is for, I think, a lot of people a huge draw. Do you have a hand in sort of suggesting or working with the bands on that, or you just kind of kick an idea to them and they come back with what they're going to do?
Well, it sometimes that's the case, and sometimes it's me. Like, and each one of those situations is different. Like, as an example, like in LA, I pitched the idea of the all Celtic Frost set to Tom G. Warrior, and we worked it out, and he was down to do that. And I pitched an all the Gathering set to Testament, and they came back with hey, how about we do all of the Gathering and all of the New Order, because the Gathering is only like 45 minutes long. I was like, oh wow, okay, cool. And then this year, I pitched Obituary with the idea of Cause of Death, which was really cool because they've never done anything like that before. Testament, I think they did a tour where they played all of the New Order and all of the Legacy at some point. And obviously, Tom G. Warrior has played a set of all Celtic Frost songs in his life. But for Obituary, this is them kind of, I don't want to say stepping out of their comfort zone, but definitely trying something new. So for them to be receptive to that has been cool. And, we're fortunate enough to have really good, close relationships with a lot of these bands. Obituary is a veteran of the Decibel magazine tour from back in 2017, so we know what we can do for them and they can do for us in that sense. But then with Enslaved, it was actually their manager who pitched the idea to me in 2018 at the New York date of the Decibel magazine tour. And I was like, dude, that sounds awesome. Let's figure that out. That to me just became like, wow, this is a perfect idea for this event. And the Enslaved guys are super laid back and super easy to work with. So, we figured it all out. And I got to say, we're only like 2.5 weeks away from the festival as of today. And man, the work that they have put into this performance, like they are going to have a bigger production for their set than any set that we've ever had at Metal and Beer Fest before, or any Decibel event really. It's like pretty over the top, and also I don't want to give too much away, but it's just going to be pretty sick. So that's something they brought to the table. So it really kind of depends on the artist and just our relationship with them and how comfortable we are with them really going in, I think.
Cool. One thing that I really appreciated about the event last spring in Philly was it feels intimate. It's very small. It's not a ton of tickets. For those not familiar with the venue, the Fillmore in Philadelphia is an amazing venue. Great sound. It looks big, but it feels small, and it's not a lot of people. I think it's really cool to have kind of a limit on tickets. I think it's probably an unconventional approach, especially for a festival when you're thinking about having to pay all the bands and work with vendors and, all the contributors and everybody. But I think it's really special that it's small. It's definitely smaller than other festivals I've been to,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. And fortunately for us, the Fillmore has been just incredible hosts for 3 years, and just, they get it. And they know, we're not going in there trying to sell 2,500 tickets, which you could sell at the Fillmore. We want it to be kind of a comfortable space, and you can still make it work financially without selling that amount of tickets. Especially since a lot of the beer fest are the ones that include beer with the ticket, which is a limited amount. Those are a higher price tag, so you can kind of make up for not having the venue packed to the rafters. But I think it just lends to the vibe. It's a comfortable space. It's a beautiful space, and it's not overwhelmed with people. That said, we've definitely sold more tickets this year than we've ever sold before, so it might be a little more cramped, but it's still not going to be like not going to be like some crazy field of 50,000 euros and something at a big major festival. Our events are pretty modest in comparison, even though the talent that we have at them, I think, stacks up with pretty much anything.
I agree, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing that the timing, especially for the third annual East Coast show coming up here, is mid-April, which is also the start of festival season. So you have kind of Europe is already sort of kicked off with Roadburn coming up the same weekend, I think, and Desert Fest, London, and others coming right after. So have you ever encountered trouble booking a band you wanted for the fest? I mean, it seems to be a decent little mix of international and North American bands.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely had bands like that we've approached it like, oh, we're going to do Roadburn, or we got an offer from Roadburn and Metal and Beer Fest. We're trying to figure out which one to take. But again, we have it's only 14 bands every year, so it's not like we're in danger of running out of bands. And we have, like I said, we have a pretty wide palette when it comes to Metal and Beer Fest appropriate bands. You can have Monster Magnet and Baroness, but you can also have Carcass and Obituary, and crazy black metal bands, underground sludge bands, whatever. Like, we can do a lot of different things. So we're not in any box in that sense. Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't sweat that. I just try to keep our events spaced out away from other U.S. festivals. And the interesting thing is, like, not only do we have to be aware of not being up against another U.S. metal or music festival, we have to be aware of not being up against another major U.S. beer event. So, because, there are plenty of events in that industry that happen annually, and, like, the breweries, the bigger ones, they certainly need to attend those, so you definitely don't want to do something like have a festival the same weekend as something like Great American Beer Fest in Colorado or something like that. So there are a couple things that you end up working around that you normally wouldn't work around with, like, a straight-up metal festival or something like that. But, we generally play pretty nicely with the other big metal fests. I mean, I've known the MDF guys for like a dozen years, and we go there every year, and it's a great experience, and I love that event, and, we actively promote them, trying to push that out. We have a good relationship with, like, Psycho Vegas and things like that. So for us in the U.S., we're not like, we don't really look at it as a competition in that sense, because I think what we're doing also is a bit different than what everybody else is doing. Otherwise, we wouldn't have bothered to do it in the first place.
Word. Another thing that I really like about the fest is you guys always seem to have some very talented locals, or it just happens that you get, the Northeast and Philly in particular just seems to have, is on a tremendous roll right now with bands up and coming and veteran. Obviously, Baroness has ties to the area, but, whether it's Rosetta, who have been around a bit and are amazing, as well as Heavy Temple, one of my favorite bands. I don't know if that's sort of a conscious effort from you guys to also keep it a little local too, but they're both, everybody there is worthy. And in the past, you've also had some semi-locals or locals who certainly belong with these other bands.
I mean, we've done stuff like with, obviously Horrendous has been on the bill before, and even semi-local up through DC and Baltimore and stuff like that. Like, for us, it's, we even though we're a Philly magazine, I feel like we've never really had like a huge Philly presence. Part of that's probably because I haven't lived in Philly for nearly 11 years now. So that even though we do have like people on staff who live in Philly and work in Philly and are heavily involved in what's going on there, it does make it a little bit different. But we are definitely aware of the Philly metal scene and music scene, and for us it is important to be able to give give a band like Heavy Temple or a band like Outer Heaven the opportunity to play at a venue like the Fillmore, which they wouldn't normally have otherwise if we weren't around to say, hey, let's put these guys on there. Because number one, they're good. Number two, I think they actually can positively affect a draw for people who are like friends of theirs who want to come out and see it. And three, it just feels like it's a nice way to kind of just give back to that community and feel like we're actually helping things along. You know, like we have multiple platforms of media to expose young bands, and you know, everybody in the music industry will lament the fact that there aren't these obvious avenues to promote bands like there used to be. You know, there's no MTV, there's no terrestrial radio, there aren't things like that you could just step by step build a band over a couple albums or a few albums or whatever. So for us, it's kind of like, well, you know, we really like this band, we really like this young band, we can make them the lead review in the magazine, and then they could open a date on the Decibel tour, and then they can do a flexi disc, and then, you know, they could play a spot on Metal and Beer Fest on the West Coast, and then, you know what, we can actually put them as the opening act on the tour next year. Like, we have like I don't want to say it's a system, but we have these tools that allow us to present those opportunities to bands, and for us, it's just a cool, gratifying thing. You know, it's not like we see a ton out of it, but it just feels like the right thing to do. And you know, at the end of the day, if we like the bands, we like the band. So it just makes sense.
It's like the minor league baseball for metal.
Right? Yeah, we have a pretty developed farm system in Philadelphia right now.
Indeed.
Not with the Phillies, mind you.
No.
But otherwise we do.
Indeed. As we wind down, I just wanted to touch on a few more things. As a non-craft beer connoisseur, although an appreciator, and I certainly loved trying all the different beers last year, I really love that you have the brewers, a lot of them personally on site, not just people pouring, but actually answering questions about the beer and people asking about the process. Obviously, some of the more popular names, obviously people know Three Floyds and True and Metal Monkey, and New York City people certainly know Kings County Brewers because of their association with banned beers and ales. But some of the more hoof-hearted, some of the lesser known ones though, I definitely found a lot of value in high quality, delicious beers. Is there any in particular you're looking forward to, or somebody new this year that wasn't on last year?
Well, we have some new stuff this year. We've got a meadery for the first time is going to appear at Metal and Beer Fest. It's Delaware-based. They're called Burning Horn. And not only did they brew a Rosetta mead a couple of years ago, but they're making a special mead for Enslaved for the fest that they went all out. I know they collaborated directly with the band. Like Ivar from Enslaved sent ingredients from Norway to Delaware to be included in this batch, and it's called Eternal Frost, obviously. And it will be just available at the event. So I'm looking forward to trying stuff like that. Like Three Floyds are amazing. Obviously, I only get to drink their stuff. And at our events, it's not really distributed here on the East Coast, and I don't get out to the Midwest very often. So anytime I get a chance to check out whatever they have going on, that's great. There's a brewery that's actually not terribly far from where I live in Virginia called Droid Theory, who were there last year, who'll be back this year, and they were known at their onset as for big, heavy ABV dark stouts, which are my personal favorites. So they're really good at those. And I think they kind of started branching out more into the IPA thing, though, to get a little more traction commercially, because I guess IPA is kind of the mainstream of craft beers at this point. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different things. There are some things I just never even get to sometimes. You know, like obviously I'm busy with stuff to do around the event, but I know I think last year I didn't even get to try the Society beer, which I was bummed about because those guys came all the way from San Diego. So yeah, I feel like if you're not an aficionado, but just somebody who has interest and like just want to try stuff, you just have pretty much anything at your disposal style-wise. There's a mix of everything, whether it's like ales and lagers, or stouts and porters, or sours, or whatever you're into, you can try something there. But if you're a huge nerd, again, it's like it's heaven, because this is like your one opportunity to get all this stuff in one place. So I think it just works kind of on multiple levels. You know, like if you're beer curious and you want to go in on it, it's going to be like, I mean, it's going to be a good value ultimately, because it's like what you would pay for like a regular pour beer at a rock show. It's going to be what, like $12 or something. Like you have 2 or 3 of those over the course of 7 bands. Like you're already going to overpay what you would have paid for the metal and beer ticket. So I think it's kind of a win for anybody who is going to this event and plans on drinking something. You know.
Right on. Just a last question as we finish up, Albert, and thank you so much for your time in advance. I'm sure you have the New Fest right ahead of you, but I have to ask. LA was a success. 3 years in Philly now. I imagine this upcoming one's going to be major. What's next for you guys? Have you thought about other cities? Are you guys going to grow this thing like in the same way that the Death Fest seemed to be mutating and growing all over the world? Is that a thing for you, or are you happy to keep it small into a few cities?
The way I look at it is we just kind of leave our options open right now. We are a small company, and we are at capacity issues right now in general with everything that we have to do, because there is a monthly magazine, and there is a special issue that goes along with that. So we literally make 13 magazines a year. We have the tour, which we're working on the lineup for 2020 right now, which that'll be its 9th year of the tour. Working on 2 books that are going to come out on Decibel Books, one at the end of this year, one in the first quarter of 2020. So it's really kind of a question of being able to balance all of it. And honestly, it's like not wanting to get too far ahead of ourselves, and just really like Los Angeles is an example. Like I don't feel like we have everything right in Los Angeles. We have our dates for next year, and it's going to be in a different room than we had it in LA. We had the first one in LA. So it's like I don't want to jump on to the next one when I feel like we don't even have everything exactly where we want it with one of them. It's like I don't see us missing opportunities as a result of that. I think that we can show a nice mix of patience and aggressiveness, and like make everything grow at a rate that we're all comfortable with. And again, there are serious capacity issues. Like we do a lot of shit for a magazine. So it's really like the next thing that we would do, it's like it would have to be really the perfect scenario for us. And there's things that we've talked to people about. People have approached us. I mean, if I were to guess, I would say this won't be the end of the event line for us. But anything else that we do, it's going to have to be as good as all this stuff. So we'll have to see what comes to fruition over the next year or so, really.
Awesome, man. Well, I thank you as a peer and a fan. I thank you for all that you do. We love Decibel here at Ghost Cult and look up to you guys. And of course, we love the Metal and Beer Festival. The 3rd in Philadelphia is coming up April 13th and 14th at the Fillmore in Philadelphia. I believe there's still tickets available. We'll push the link out.
There's only a handful of the Metal and Beer ones, but there's a possibility that if we sell them out before the weekend of the fest that we'll release some more. In fact, that's something I have to check out today. But I thank you for the kind words and for the interest in even doing this, because it is within. I mean, you understand it, I'm sure, as much as anybody, with like all the noise that's out there these days. Like anybody who's like promoting an event or a product or whatever you're doing, like every little bit helps. So I do really appreciate it.
Indeed, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for hanging out with the Ghost Cult Magazine podcast, Albert. And we wish you well, and I'll see you at the fest.
All right, man. Take care.
Take care, man. Thanks for checking out today's podcast. Follow, like, and subscribe wherever you hear these podcasts. Also, check out Ghost Cult Magazine on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And finally, check us out at ghostcultmag.com. We're out. Peace.